Welcome to NAOP Solution Series, a development model for the Middle Ring Suburbs. My name is Elizabeth Sherrod, and I'll be your host. The Solution Series programs are available at no cost. About 30 minutes, and our goal is to provide you with some quick tips and insights, all types of strategies and tactics to help you succeed in today's business environment. Do you have a topic suggestion? Please email us at solutions@naop.org to let us know what topics you would like to hear about in future programs. Next slide, please. Today's presentation is based on a research project funded by the NAOP Research Foundation. The Foundation fosters building better communities through practical research and education that advances the quality and makes evident the benefits of commercial real estate ownership and development. These research projects support developers, owners, and others involved in commercial real estate to meet and exceed the needs and expectations of our communities now and in the future. Examples of completed research projects are listed on the current slide. For more information on the Foundation or to view our completed research, please visit www.naoprf.org. Next slide, please. And now, let's get on with our program. With us today is Alexander DeHogue, Director of the MIT Platform for a Permanent Modernity and of the Office for Permanent Modernity. Alexander holds a PhD in urbanism from DU Delft, a master's degree in urban design from the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, a master's in civil engineering architecture from the University of Leuven. His work includes many previous investigations and publications about the Middle Ring Suburbs. One example project is an ongoing research agenda that included design studios in the Middle Ring Suburbs of New York City from 2005 to 2008, first published as a theme issue of the journal volume, Issue 9, 2006. In the Office of Permanent Modernity, Alexander is currently engaged in a master planning effort with private developers for a large-scale mixed-use facility in Brussels. Welcome, Alexander. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for your introduction, Elizabeth. The organization which I run and which has done the research that I'm happy to present to you today consists of both an academic arm, which is called the Platform for Permanent Modernity, which you see in your upper left, as well as an architectural and urban design firm, which operates both in Boston and Brussels and attempts to engage in innovative projects that invent, innovate, and make more profound typological changes in architecture in the city. Our fundamental driver in this is to understand and analyze the conflicting demands that are increasingly made not only on urban development, but also on buildings. These demands all being led from mostly desires for economic optimization, but how we can, from an understanding of such demands, extract poetry. When it comes to urbanism and the problem of the Middle Ring, it's important to realize that we not just play with the regular registers of form and space on the one hand and program functions on the other hand, but that we also include investigations about identity, branding, not just as a retail or a lifestyle concept, but also as something that relates to community and neighborhood identity. And finally, last but certainly not least, finance. Urbanism, insofar as being historically a profession allied with the state or with the government, now increasingly finds itself allied with developers. The world of development and an understanding of financial tools has a critical impact on form giving. That's why this becomes a fourth pillar of our urbanistic approach. The model I'm very happy to present to you today, we call it the design model for the Middle Ring Suburbs, design and development model for the Middle Ring Suburbs, is in fact created in an abstract space. And it's important that I emphasize this. There are about 12 different ingredients to this model that are put together in the drawing that you see here, which is in effect a model. However, this model, while maximizing the potentials that a Middle Ring suburb offers, is in this case created in a space that is not corresponding to any actual site. It's assuming a relative freedom of development. It's not taking into account the complexities and vagaries of smaller grain parcels, of site issues, and of geometrical problems imposed by the misalignment of, for instance, railroads and roadways. In that sense, this is an abstract principle, but what it does contain is the maximization of potential value for a middle ring suburb. Why are we even interested in this? The middle ring suburb as an area, and then you see here a sample area, it could be anywhere in the northeast, but my point is that the middle ring suburb as an area in our cities cannot easily be redeveloped or developed further using the tools of either exurban greenfield development, which we've seen a lot of over the last decades, nor those of downtown compact city redevelopment strategies, which also have happened substantially, at least in some of the more successful East Coast cities. The middle ring suburb, however, presents its own challenges. And I think you can see those challenges very clearly on the slide you're currently watching. You see there, for instance, a mass transit line, a commuter rail line. You see a very well-wired automobile state highway system. You see older residential neighborhoods. You see a big retail complex. You see a fantastic piece of waterfront from the Conservation Agency. And you see some older industry. And all these are in very close proximity to each other. But you know what? None of these are collaborating. These various layers could mean value to each other. But because of the way they've been implanted, almost haphazardly, and in a historical succession, without clear regards to one another, the result now is a system of components that are of great multiplier effect potential to one another, but are really not using that. Let me try to specify that. In the middle of the drawing, you saw the commuter rail line. However old these systems are, they provide a valuable alternative and redundant system to automobile use, so that to offer citizens dual mobility or dual access to transportation. However, if you look at it here, you can see that the area immediately around the commuter rail line station, which frankly is the first half-mile radius around, is not developed. On the left side, we have a classification yard with number 1, and then sites number 2, 3, and 4 are themselves huge parking lots, or in any case inaccessible to regular developments. These parking lots are not related to this train station. Furthermore, you can see the beautiful waterfronts, none of which are really accessible to the residential that is in the vicinity. So these are not being used to add value and quality to the residential areas. And we see the retail environments, which themselves are purely and only operating on the basis of their access to the state highway system. Again, no access to the local neighborhood fabrics or to the mass transit line. This is surprising if you think about the fact that most of the people here live in a very close vicinity. There is a sizable density to the middle ring suburb. It's denser than your conventional, more outlying suburb. Okay, we have a series of layers here, a series of promises, a series of potential contributions of various elements to each other that are not being taken advantage of. How did we get here, and how can we improve on this? In order to understand how to improve, it doesn't hurt us to take a little step back. This painting from Thomas Cole illustrates an almost ideal condition of domesticated nature. What is represented in this painting is a dream, an aspiration that nature could civilize man, that nature could make us all better, mentally more sound, more hygienic, more intelligent, more civilized, more sophisticated. Domesticated nature was supposed to redeem us. This was a very powerful dream that is strongly linked to the exodus from the city that Americans undertook throughout most, at least throughout substantial parts of the 20th century. Going to greenfield suburbs, green city suburbs, using parkways with big buffer zones was all part of a premise that green was going to save us. I have no criticism of this dream. You can just observe that that foundational dream and the physical structure that belongs to it, that of landscape, has been evaporated from the system of the middle ring suburb. While being foundational to the first wave of immigrants to such areas, that reason to even come there has now gone, is no longer present. Let's look at this simple comparison. To the left, you see a parkway as it was meant at the first inception of the middle ring suburbs. 1 or 2 lanes in each direction, surrounded by thousands of feet of buffer zones with rolling green hills and forestation on either side, offering beautiful views and a sense of cruising through a picturesque landscape. On the right, you see what this has become. The 1 or 2 lanes in each direction have become 5 or 6. The intersections have become bridge and tunnels, and instead of buffer zones, we find ourselves confronted with walls of concrete and jersey barriers. This is our current predicament. To the left, you see where we came from. The fact of the matter is that an ongoing internal slow urbanization process within the Middle Ring suburb has robbed it of its foundational dream without offering a replacement. Today, the Middle Ring suburb is no longer green, but it's also not yet fully acknowledged as being urban. As a result of that in-between, it hasn't been able to take advantage of its own assets. Here you see the situation in Boston. Boston is just a sample city, a reference city, but in fact, we can see already the same situation as you would see in many other cities. Larger swaths of suburbs that are relatively close to the downtown are accessed both by the interstate system as well as by the city transit system. Here you see 7 principal values that Middle Ring suburbs could offer. First of all, simultaneous access. These systems do have access to both suburban car networks and mass transit. Second, they have solid value. They're basically crisis resistant. What we saw over the last 4 years is that these areas have not incurred substantial value losses after the crisis hit the country at large. Third, they're currently used below potential. We have had at least 30 to 40 years of almost no serious investment in these areas, neither from the government or from a private sector point of view. Instead, we've had investment in rebuilding our downtowns, compact city redevelopment strategies. We've had massive investment in greenfields and exurbs, edge cities. But in the big area in between, we've seen very little. Fourth, there are some substantial underused assets, parks, infrastructures, etc., that are adopting these neighborhoods that are not being used properly. I gave you the example earlier of the waterfront. Fifth, there are several new and shifting audiences. Blue-collar groups exist there, but increasingly see an influx of Generation Y, young professionals, as well as of immigrants of various income classes. In other words, these areas have a broad appeal to several niche groups, and there is a non-exclusionary feel to these areas. Sixth, there is a political will to make things happen and to broaden the town's capital base in such areas. As they have not had substantial investment, it is relevant for these towns to attract it, and they're willing to walk an extra mile to get it. Seventh, quite important, these areas could be locations for new retail distribution hybrids. With the arrival of Amazon and related online shopping models, conventional retail is under pressure. A merger of retail and distribution in a single operation, a single building, is therefore increasingly being investigated. Middle Ring suburbs might provide the ideal location because they have both access to mass transit and an urban sense of shopping, as well as to the distributional and logistical demands that are offered by a suburban environment. Let's take a look at the model. The model, as you see it here, consists of 12 components that are brought together in a single geometry. Here are the 12 components. First of all, an alignment of at least 3 restaurants. One of them should be ethnic and relevant to the identity of the neighborhood. Second, a simple, large, programmable open space. Could be a farmer's market. Third, an art depot or warehouse. Fourth, a parking for the transfer station. Fifth, a specific commuter rail connection design. Sixth, a few suburban brands. 7, Lofts and Light-industrial warehouses. 8, high-quality residential space. 9th, your old favorite, office space. 10th, a specific way of dealing with truck traffic so as to not go through the main, most fragile public spaces of the project. 11th, right dimensioning and distancing of the space between parking, rail, and bus stations. And 12th, a new way of thinking of parking, let's say parking structures with conversion options. Let's go through these one by one. The restaurants and ethnic cuisine alignment implies that we want a few restaurants in each other's vicinity. What that means is they should be visible to each other. 3 is a minimum, 5 is better, and more is even is also good. What they do is they, in the evening, they attract, there's a multiplier effect, and restaurants attract more than they would attract separately. So you want a little grouping there, but they must be experienced as being together. We do build an embryonic sense of centrality this way. Second, if you look at the most active areas in the Middle Ring suburbs, in terms of outdoor areas, there are markets. Sometimes immigrant markets, sometimes farmers markets. We sense that farmers markets, and there's also increasing research to back this up, offer real potential for future growth and also increase the value of the areas around it. So the farmers market could be an outdoor space or an indoor space. In more Nordic cities, it's definitely an asset to have an indoors environment. They should be really visible. That means that a few edges should access streets and visibility from streets. There should be a clear, simple space, legible as such, and bounded and open so that you can indeed use it also for walking across on non-market days. Third element, not equally important, and one may think of these as very subtle gestures, but they actually go a long way in unlocking the, as of yet, not fully visible yet, potential of these areas. But the third element is an art depot, or let's say a low-cost art center with a big footprint. What we see already is that segments of the creative industry are moving out to Middle Ring suburbs. Why? Because there is a need that they have for larger areas, larger atelier spaces to work, draw, take photographs, etc., do work on music. And these areas are very hard to afford in downtown or inner cities. However, these audiences and this clientele also wants access to an urban vibe and atmosphere. For this reason, the Middle Ring suburb is ideal for them. This process is already occurring, but these groups are lacking visibility in such environment. The provision of a large depot or warehouse for art purposes is a very cheap operation. We don't have to make a fancy museum. We can use very cheap disposable architecture, but helps a lot with the creation of a sense of identity, purpose, and attraction to the neighborhood. We recommend that these spaces will be basically publicly accessible. I want to give you an example of using a very simple big box architecture, logistics architecture for civic purposes, and how this is working for us in a different context. We were faced with a situation around the town near Brussels where we had a form of sprawl occurring, or at least was being planned for. We made a proposal that would combine the various disparate parcels into a single integrated structure. In other words, to aggregate those programs into a large single big box. This proposal was liked, and the result is a building that, while being constructed with the logics of industrial warehouse architecture, in fact offers many, many public benefits, both to official groups as well as to informal user groups, and are being supported by both the youth center as well as by other communities that are beginning to appropriate the structure. Fourth, parking is a major issue. We need to design the parking so that it is not drawing all the traffic through the middle of the neighborhood, but we also need to design it in a way that doesn't become an alienating structure. We propose to refer to rarely be taller than 3 stories. It loses its basic functionality after that anyway, but nevertheless to embed it with different functions on the ground floor level and potentially on the floors above it, so that the parking as a separate structure, as a legible item in the city, pretty much begins to disappear. It begins to be sandwiched between other urban functions. Fifth, also very important, the provision of a commuter rail connection as a thriving public space. What we mean by this is that currently mass transit authorities design and build typically their own access to the platforms with a little bit of facilities, but as a separate public space. We think that this is a missed opportunity. The integration, continuity, and visibility of the public realm over the tracks, or under it for that matter, but in any sense, with a measure of total integration with the fabric around the station, with the city at large, will provide huge benefits, not only for connecting hitherto disconnected neighborhoods, but also by providing more continuous retail walls and directions for the public to walk. Sixth, a few suburban mall brands. It is important to not just draw on the existing and growing audience of Generation Y professionals, immigrants, blue-collar workers, and urbanites. However, it's also important to draw in higher purchasing power groups from the outlying suburbs. For that reason, a few familiar, comfortable brands need to be introduced. However, they should not take prominent space in the neighborhood project because that will disrupt the branding identity of the area. Seventh, Lofts and Light-industrial warehouses. We already addressed the rise of the creative class or the creative industry and its potential location, its work location in particular, in the Middle Ring suburbs. Think about it this way. If we can provide a series of large open spaces, loft type, which are not totally, really not finished at all, but are simply providing square footage, this will be a major draw to this kind of audience. That, in combination with light industrial warehouses, provides a huge opportunity for a different type of development in these areas. Eighth, high-quality residential. There is ample residential in Middle Ring suburbs. However, the stock is quite old, as I said, typically built between the 20s and the 60s, and has been repaired and patched up in some cases, but in many cases not convincingly for a serious value increase. In other words, high-quality residential needs to be injected and will contribute to the sense of diversity around the neighborhood, but also will provide an important missing component and draw for the project at large, with multiplier effects on both the restaurants and most of the other programs. Office space, I mean, I would call it the easy one, the money maker program, simply because it can be produced on or on top of many of the elements I'm mentioning so far. And it's definitely something that in the second stage would make a lot of sense here. And especially near a mass transit line, office is always a durable option. It allows for commuters to arrive at the station and be right at their workplace. 10, to remove truck traffic from selected areas, I mentioned this before, is very critical. We do need a strong logistical access to the area. We need bus traffic, we need access for the warehouses, but it's also important that the immediate area around the station is kept free and that the more fragile public spaces that ultimately add the value for this project are not destroyed by 18-ton trucks. 11th, the space between parking, commuter rail, and bus station is itself of huge importance. The distances between these three nodes need to be calibrated carefully. We can extend easily to about 650 feet or perhaps a little more, but I would watch out of extending it much further. The flow in this triangle, the flow between train station, parking lot, and bus station is the critical flow that is a regional one that happens above whatever local flows exist. This flow, therefore, is a general driver, I would say, for development. It needs to be designed first and forms the backbone of the project. 12th, last and not least, the design of parking structures with possibilities for conversion. We recently did a project in Brussels where we developed a concept like this together with the real estate development group. If you look on the left side, you can see what looks like a loft building or a light industrial building. It could even be a residential building. And on the right, you see actually the same building elevated a parking garage. This is exactly the point. We propose that when we build, construct parking garages that are in fact more comfortable and more civic than they need to be if they were only going to be used as a garage. But we propose to build those with the aim that within 5 years, we will convert them to other uses. In other words, there is not a single building in the newly emerging urban TOD that really looks like a parking structure. So no more of the federally funded sloping ramp parking structure that like monsters destroy anything around them. Instead, we get a more sophisticated piece of urban fabric that can be a garage and then many other things. We think there's a business model for this, and it has to do with the gradual conversion of the parking use to other uses. Let me try to explain this in a second. In any case, what you see here are the various groups, the middle class, immigrant communities, Generation Y workers, and artists gradually getting closer together and creating more overlaps and multiplier effects for each other. That's the sociological and lifestyle profile for the Middle Ring suburb. Just another word about the Brussels project. Here you see the area as it stands today. The big market area with the biggest immigrant markets of all of the city, surrounded by a slaughterhouse and a grandiose old monument. We propose to give a form to those markets, to formalize it, as it were, and to build a series of urban warehouses around the market area. These warehouses give a form and shape to the market, but also themselves contain several programs that are industrial and retail in nature. However, they would start as parking buildings. They would not all be built as such, but just imagine the following scenario. On the left, the white building you see on the left is the first building to go up. It will contain a series of parking structures. However, these will be designed to convert to other uses as soon as a second building, which is to the right, would be constructed. Upon completion of the second building, the parking is hitherto in the white building will be moved over and the white building begins its conversion process. The same hopping can repeat itself from the second building to the third building, which is just above it, to the fourth, which is just above that. And what you see is that we are able to maintain a systematic parking availability and accessibility throughout the entirety of the construction, while we also produce a complete urban neighborhood. Here you see a plan of the area with the new immigrant markets as a central field, the big square of Brussels. Investigations into the typology of the parking/warehouse building, urban warehouse. The inspiration for this type, you see, this is a mill building in New England, which in all its neutrality, simplicity, and effectiveness actually acts as an early version of this idea. And architectural elaborations of the principle. I wanted just to use for a second this last example to demonstrate that of these 12 principles, some of these may sound out of the ordinary or a little bit strange, but in fact many of them have been tested before, and some of them are really developing well in other contexts. I want to make a big plea for us to redevelop the Middle Ring suburbs. Not only do they need it, there is a real opportunity there, and I also want to urge all of us to do it with a different model of development than the one we've used for the compact city or the greenfield exurb. I believe that the model presented here could present a significant contribution to such a development model. And I thank you for your attention.
Alexander, thanks for a great presentation and giving us an overview of your research report on development in the Middle Ring suburbs. For more information on the NAIOP Research Foundation or to view other completed research, please visit www.naioprf.org. Our next Solution Series program will be available on June 5th. Watch your email for NAIOP Source, our corporate e-newsletter, for the program link. Thank you for listening to our session and have a good day.